Good morning, everyone. This is Mike O'Malley here with a hurricane outlook and discussion recorded on June 18th, 2023, around 11 a.m. Eastern Time. We have a lot of things to talk about today, including Invest Area 92L out in the Eastern Tropical Main Development Region. Is Hurricane Bret on the horizon? Let's go ahead and find out. Taking a wide look across the tropical Atlantic this morning, we notice our system, Invest Area 92L, that is currently located in the Eastern Tropical Atlantic. And behind that, we are also monitoring a second tropical wave that has now splashed down and emerged off the coast of Africa. Both of these systems are going to be worth monitoring over the next several days, with our primary focus here today being Invest Area 92L, which could get very close, uncomfortably close to the Lesser Antilles over the next several days. Looking at the visible satellite imagery for our system this morning, we notice that it has developed more spin in the atmosphere today. It is very comfortably spinning up there in the mid-levels, and you can very clearly see that turning there associated with this tropical wave. So what's really kind of going down here, we're going to go ahead and break this down. We actually do have some easterlies here on the northern side, and we have westerlies here on the southern side. There has been westerlies here since yesterday and since last evening. However, these westerly winds at the low levels are not quite defined enough, and the circulation is not yet closed off into a closed low-level vortex, and we need that for classification of a tropical cyclone. Irregardless, though, we do see that there is convection starting to develop in more of a band-like feature this morning on the visible satellite imagery. And this is one of the signs, one of the hallmark signs of a developing tropical cyclone when you have the banding structure that develops like this. So this is well on its way to becoming a tropical depression and could get a tropical cyclone classification on it probably as soon as tonight if this convection increases enough and we get more defined westerlies here on the southern side, indicating a closed low-level circulation. So here's the 8 a.m. tropical weather outlook from the National Hurricane Center. Invest Area 92L, now with a 90% chance of tropical cyclone formation over the next week as this moves westward and west-northwestward across the tropical main development region. Very rare to be seeing something like this happen in the month of June, and another wave that is likely to get tagged by NHC behind this one as well. We'll be watching this as now the portions of the Greater Antilles are now included within this shaded area, which means the potential formation area and somewhat correlated to the ultimate track of this system. So this definitely has my attention, and we're going to talk about all of the specific details on the system right now. So what we're looking at here, we're looking at the new HVAS system. This is a new computer model that is going to replace the old HMON and HWRF hurricane models within the next year. So this is not truly operational yet, but thanks to Levi Cowan for making this available on his site, because this will be the new hurricane products here within the next year. We're looking at the upper level winds here at 200 millibars, and we're going to be looking at the intensity for this storm and what might happen over the next several days. So first of all, we're taking a look here at the upper level outflow pattern. This is valid for right now, actually 11 a.m. this morning. We notice there's fairly good easterlies in the upper levels turning to northernlies and then back to kind of west to east winds here. Or I'm sorry, yeah, from west to east winds out across here. So you got easterlies aloft and kind of backing, and what this indicates to me is that there's a fairly favorable upper level anticyclonic pattern that has developed with this tropical system located right about here. This means that the vertical shear is going to be very light for the next several days. In fact, there's virtually going to be none, and that's going to allow the storm to intensify nicely. The HVAS system develops a coherent vortex within about the next day or so. And we'll also be watching this tropical wave back here. Some of the recent guidance, including the GFS, has continued to indicate further development of the tropical wave further off towards the east, but we'll cover this in a later video. But notice that the outflow is expanding relatively nicely The one thing that we are going to have to watch over the next several days is this little bit of a trough right here in the upper levels. This might actually prove to be a little bit of a detriment as the storm gains latitude and moves further off towards the north and west. But irregardless, the HVAC system develops this into a full-blown hurricane within 72 hours. I will caution that I do think that this is probably a little bit overdone. The HVAC and HWRF, HMON systems are notorious for making these systems a lot stronger than what they would be as an invest in their very beginning stages of tropical cyclone formation. And especially without recon data, it's a little bit hard to determine if this is a viable option or not. I don't think so, but it is just something to monitor, and we'll talk about why here in a minute. But irregardless, the upper level flow of this storm isn't expected to change much throughout the next 5 days, as there's going to be fairly good upper level anticyclonic flow aloft, meaning divergence aloft, convergence at the surface, and a strengthening system. But within about 5 or 6 days, this is really going to begin to change as the storm approaches the Lesser Antilles, which is right here. This is Barbados, and this is the Greater Antilles, Puerto Rico, the Dominican Republic, the U.S. British Virgin Islands right here. So that's just for context, but we notice that in the Caribbean, we have another upper level high that is driving a fairly strong anticyclonic flow in the Caribbean, and that's also contributing to a wave break right here with another upper level trough that is located right here. So at this point, our storm is beginning to start to feel this as the upper level flow begins to change from a pure upper level anticyclonic flow to more shear in the upper levels out of the westerly direction, beginning to tug on our storm and tilt the vortex over. If the storm is as strong as it is here on the model, it might be able to counteract it to some degree. The HWRF forecast is relatively in similar agreement with this, although on a much further and stronger path to the south. Now, again, intensity and track here are still yet to be determined. I'm going to go over the track here in a minute, but the intensity for the most part seems to govern where this storm is going to go over the next several days. But this pattern of shear beginning to increase as the storm nears the island chain within about 5 to 6 days does seem to be on all of the reliable forecast models, the Euro and the GFS. So this is going to play a major role in what happens with this system. So this is the overall forecast track model for 12Z this afternoon, or 12Z this morning rather, because it's 8 a.m. But this is the early morning forecast cycle, and we notice that the majority of the forecast guidance continues it on a west-northwesterly trajectory throughout the next several days before eventually splitting off into several different possibilities at this particular point. The GFS here, which is this blue line, is very much so on the further right track of the possible solutions. And even on the GFS ensemble forecast, this begins to move generally west-northwest and stays that way for several days. Now, at this point, we're looking at the forecast density tracks here. There is a 50-50 chance that this goes further towards the north, and also a chance that it sneaks into the Caribbean. There seems to be two camps on the GFS, and one of them is a stronger solution, which goes further towards the north quicker, and that's because there's an upper level trough here in the atmosphere that would generally make the storm gain latitude fairly quickly. But if the storm is relatively weak, it is going to track more towards the Caribbean, and the ensemble mean today has definitely shifted within between these two extremes here. And so what we're going to be watching over the next several days is to see how the storm consolidates and exactly how quickly this thing is able to intensify and develop an inner core, as that's going to govern where this storm is going to go. So for right now, who is at risk? Generally speaking, we're looking at the northern part of the island chain, the USVI, potentially Puerto Rico and the Dominican Republic and Barbados. So for those reasons, right now, we're putting a caution symbol, a watch out area for these areas within the yellow kind of filled area. These areas must watch the progress of this system over the next several days as the storm eventually will gain closer to these areas. I think really south of this area, from St. Vincent and the Grenadines southward to Trinidad, Tobago, Guyana, those areas I think are going to be in the clear from the system. I do not really think there is a present threat to those areas from Invest 92L. However, it is imperative that you continue to monitor the forecast, as these forecasts will change. And so we're going to be really trying to watch this. But I do think that the greatest threat right now is going to be for the northern part of the island chain right in here, especially north of Barbados at this given point. We'll see how strong it is. If a storm does make it into the Caribbean, I do think it will be weaker than if it stays out over the open ocean here, where there's less vertical shear for the storm to run into. And finally here, looking at the European forecast model, this is just another way of looking at this system. This would be something that might actually be beneficial to the islands. You have a storm here within about 90 hours. It looks fairly strong and healthy, but as it approaches the islands, it begins to fall apart. And we notice that there's just a remnant kind of cyclone moving through, a weaker tropical storm or depression moving through, bringing with it some more heavier rainfall to portions of the northern Antilles here, the USVI, and Puerto Rico, and potentially Hispaniola in the Dominican Republic. This would actually be a fairly relatively healthy look. You can see here, this develops it into a hurricane on the model and then weakens it. This would actually be a fairly good thing for the island chain, especially the USVI, the Northern Islands, Puerto Rico, and the DR that needs the heavy rainfall. So this is a very possible solution, and certainly something that would be a beneficial situation if this were to happen. So we're going to keep a very close eye for our friends down there, and certainly just continue to monitor the forecast. But it seems like that there will be strengthening of some sort in the tropical Atlantic. It just remains to be seen how much, because I do think that still governs the intensity to some degree. But we'll have to see as the storm system continues to move south of where most of the reliable forecast guidance continues to have this, because it's a little bit weaker. So that's going to have some implications, and we're going to be tracking that for you throughout the week. And just for looks out here in the Eastern Pacific Basin, we are watching Invest Area 90E, the first invest of the Eastern Pacific hurricane season. This system is expected to continue moving out to sea and is no longer going to be, is no threat to land. It was never a threat to land, but this is not really expected to develop into much. And if it does, it'll be relatively weak and away from any land threat. So with that being said, I hope you have a great rest of your afternoon and evening. God bless. Take care. I am Michael O'Malley, and I'll talk to you guys again some more this evening with an update on Invest Area 92L.